If you're into M110s, stick around because we have got an awesome video in the works here for you. We're going to compare my $15,000 Knights Armament M110 to a PSA Sabre 10 M110 clone that comes in at the $1,500 mark. It's going to be a super fun video. Check it out. Now, the M110 precision rifle really needs no introduction. It's probably the most iconic rifle to come out of the global war on terror. It entered service there in the mid-2000s, maybe late 2000s. It's still in use today, and it's seen use across the world, putting it in social media and news stories for the past 20 years. If you're like me, you find it a really cool rifle, and you probably want the ability to own one for yourself. Now, unfortunately, owning a real deal M110 from Knights Armament is extremely expensive because of how rare they are. They're almost impossible to find on the civilian market, and when they are found, they command unbelievable prices. Even the parts for them command just absurd prices. Recently, on Gunbroker, I believe it was, some of these URX2 rails that you see on this rifle were selling for like $4,500. So just the rail, $4,500. You're seeing complete rifles set up like this with suppressors selling between $10,000 and $20,000. Suppressors alone going for $4,000 to $5,000. So when you start trying to put together your own M110, you're going to find the process is next to impossible and extremely expensive. Now, they're really cool rifles. They shoot great. I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to own an M110. Yes, this one's black. It's not tan like your iconic M110 that you've seen in service. That's because it's actually a Mark 11 Mod 1, which would be the predecessor to the M110. But functionally, this is an M110 rifle as it sits right here. This is something like a 2009 era rifle, so it doesn't have the ambi lower. It's got the older, say, A2 style stock on it. But functionally, what we're going to see for performance out of this rifle is going to mirror the true M110 that our US military is using. Now, because of how pricey and rare these rifles are, it's opened up an entire clone world for those of you that want the opportunity to own an M110 style rifle. And with that, enter the Palmetto State Armory Sabre 10 M110 clone rifle. This thing is unbelievable. Let me swap over to it quick. So what you're going to see right here is the Palmetto State Armory Sabre 10 M110 clone. This rifle is going to get you very much an M110 style rifle for $1,500. Really unbelievable what you're able to get from Palmetto State Armory for this price point. This actually includes a Magpul bipod in the package. It includes a couple of magazines. It includes a rifle that, in my opinion, looks very much like a real M110. But with anything, you wonder, is that price point too good to be true? Does this rifle actually hold true to what an M110 is, and how does it perform versus a real M110? I know many of you have probably watched a ton of content on this rifle. This thing really blew up social media when it launched, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago. There's a ton of great videos out there about this rifle, but I think we're getting a unique space here because I'm going to compare this PSA Sabre 10 M110 clone to my actual Knights Armament M110 out here. Now, how are we going to do that? In this video, we're going to take a close-up look at 100-yard performance. We're going to measure groups, unsuppressed as well as suppressed. We're going to get our velocity. We're going to plug that into our ballistic calculator, and then we're going to go out and shoot steel, starting here at about 650 yards, and we're going to push out to 1,200 yards or so if things are going well. By the end of this video, you're going to have an idea of how this PSA clone or M110 clone stacks up to the real deal. Again, this thing is coming in at roughly 1/10 the price point for the rifle. It's pretty nuts, actually, and it's available. I looked this morning. You can actually order this from PSA right now. So if you're in the market for a PSA Sabre 10 like this, you want maybe your own M110 clone, then stick around because in this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the performance. Now, before we do that, I got to ask for your help to grow this channel. I'm on a mission to get to 100,000 subscribers, and I need your help to do it. If you like this kind of content, go down and hit that subscribe button so that you're in line for my next video drop. We're growing by the day, and I appreciate each and every one of you that are subscribed and supporting my channel. But if you're watching this video and you're not subscribed, do me a solid and click that subscribe button so you're in line. Now with that, let's dig into the gear review and take a look at the details on each build that we're going to run out to distance. First, why don't we start with the PSA Sabre 10 since I'm holding it. So the rifle that I'm holding right here is the PSA Sabre 10 M110 clone. Again, if you're curious about specs, you can navigate over to the Palmetto State Armory website. You can do that through my campsite bio link in the description below. So on their website, you can learn all the specs. This has a 1-in-10 twist barrel. It's got the flat dark earth finish on it. It looks great. It's got the Palmetto State Armory 2-stage trigger in it. It's got a nice kind of charging handle. I believe this is a Radian Raptor, so it's a very nice charging handle. Got a very nice bolt release. It's actually ambi, so on both sides of the lower. Overall, when you open the box, it's an impressive rifle. Now, in order to complete the vibe, I went ahead and installed my Griffin Armament PSR7 suppressor. So Griffin Armament is a longtime supporter of my channel. They actually provided this suppressor for me to use in content. And I like the PSR7 because it actually reflexes back over the muzzle. So the end of the muzzle is up here about 3 inches into the can, reflexes back to kind of give it that M110 style look. But this is the PSR7. These are available right now, unlike the Knights Armament M110 can. So if you want to put together this package, everything you see here is available as we speak. Now in this comparison, I wanted optics to be comparable. So on this unit, we're running the Element Nexus provided by Utah Air Guns. Again, a longtime supporter of the channel and appreciate their support. The Element Nexus is a 4 to 25 power optic. It's got a beautiful Christmas tree style reticle in it. This Nexus in particular is a 30mm tube, and I believe it's sized really well for use on a gas gun. You can see it's a little bit shorter, so you can still run a clip-on up front here. So Element Nexus, 25 power top end, mil scope with a Christmas tree. It's going to be comparable to what running on the Knights. On the other side of the rifle, we'll take a look at the mount here. So this is going to be the zero gravity mount. This is a 30mm mount, 1.54 inch in height, and I believe this is 0 MOA. So it positions the scope very well for your eye. Now we'll talk about the positioning here quickly. What I notice, the buttstock on this rifle is extremely short. So extremely short buttstock means I have to run a cantilever style mount and push it forward on the receiver to even come close to getting decent eye relief. That's why this thing is pushed so far forward. The stock is tiny, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the video, but that's the optics package. We're going to be running the SG Pulse electronic level here to keep the rifle from canting as we stretch out to distance. And the bipod on this rifle is going to be the MDT single pulse SkyPod. Again, MDT has been a long-time supporter of the channel, but I want to highlight these pod knobs right here. So we'll take a look at these. These are a 3D printed knob that make it so much easier to deploy and fold your SkyPod. If you have a traditional SkyPod, you know the knobs on these are tiny and quite hard to actuate if you have gloves on or it's cold out. So these pod knobs from PR Shooting Solutions get you a much more positive ability to fold and release your legs. So that's going to be the PSA Sabre 10 clone that we're going to stretch out to distance. So basically factory configuration, slapped on a nice optic. This is a $2,000 optic. So it's a very nice unit to be pushing out to distance. Now let's talk about the Knights M110. So the comparison piece here will be my Knights Armament M110 upper, or Mark 11 Mod 1 if you want to call it. Again, it is identical to the M110 that you're going to find in service with the US military. Same handguard, same receiver set, same buttstock for the early units, same Knights Armament trigger. The one difference here will be this rifle actually is rebarreled by Craddock Precision with a Bartlein. So this has got a Bartlein stainless steel barrel in it, 1 in 10 twist. So it's going to be a little bit faster twist than you would find in the military units. And Bartlein is absolute premium. This is a top of the line barrel. Unfortunately, I had to replace this barrel, maybe because of my own lack of maintenance on the original Knights barrel. But that original Knights barrel is not stainless steel. It's a chromoly barrel. And I guess maybe with keeping the can installed, it actually corroded the crown out and it shot terrible. So when accuracy went downhill, I reached out to Craddock Precision, who rebarreled this with a Bartlein that shoots unbelievable. And wait till you see it at the 100-yard line. So this is a Bartlein barrel. Shout out to Craddock Precision for the work. The caveat here versus the military M110s, this has got a much nicer barrel in it. So we're going to be comparing absolute top of the line barrel in an M110 versus this PSA Sabre 10. So just keep that in mind. Again, Knights Armament, everything else is factory. We're going to also run the Knights Armament M110 suppressor. This thing, in my opinion, completes the look of the M110, kind of that long gate latch design. It's a must for all the M110 fans out there. So this is an M110 from Knights Armament, aside from the barrel that Craddock Precision dropped in from Bartlein. Now on the other side, we'll take a look at the optics package. So in order to be comparable, I decided to run my Leupold Mk5 5-25 optic. Ally Munitions actually provided this to the channel, another longtime supporter, and I appreciate all of their help. The Mk5 5-25 I felt like was fitting for this rifle because of the 25 power top end, similar to the Element Nexus. This has a Tremor 3 reticle in it, which is a Christmas tree style reticle, which will be similar to the Nexus, and it's got a very fine aiming point. So when it comes to optics, I believe we're very closely matched in the Mk5 5-25 and the Nexus 4-25. This is going to be sitting in the Badger Ordnance Condition 1 mount. Maybe it'll be a better view on this side. And I decided to run the Condition 1 so that up top I could run the new Tango Enos Fire 4000 weapon-mounted laser rangefinder. This is kind of my third day out with this unit. I've got an initial video out that I launched a couple of weeks ago. We're going to be using this to laze targets as well as come up with our ballistic solution that we're going to shoot through both rifles out to distance. This unit is nice because it uses applied ballistics for its calculations and it hits the market for $1,400. So a very affordable unit, and so far I'm very impressed with the performance. It's holding up well and the ballistic data seems to be very true out to distance. So that's going to be the rifle that we're comparing. You can see this one actually has the skyepod double pull on it, and it's got the standard kind of smaller deployment levers there. That's where the skyepod's really kind of see it on my thumb there, much easier to deploy those legs with those pod knobs there. So that'll be the rifle optic setup that we're going to use for each of these. Now let's talk ammo. I'm excited to talk about the ammo in this video because I've got a new partner company that's come on board to support the channel, and that's going to be the crew from Recoilx. Now, I met the guys from Recoilx at a match last fall. We've been in touch since then, and now that they're up and running at full capacity, they reached out to become the ammo sponsor for this video. They've actually provided a couple hundred rounds of this Berger ammunition, 175 OTM load, for me to shoot through both rifles. Now, if you're familiar with Berger ammunition, you know this stuff is top of the line, and it's really going to allow these rifles to shine out to distance. That 175 grain bullet should pair really well with the 1 in 10 twist that we have in both of these barrels. So shout out to Recoilx. Thank you for your support in providing today's ammunition. Now, before we start shooting, let's talk about Recoilx and the product that they bring to market. Now, those of you that shoot suppressed know when you install your suppressor, your recoil impulse is quite different than when you run the brake. And if you're like me, sometimes you actually prefer to shoot a muzzle brake versus a suppressor, given certain conditions or what you might be trying to do. Suppressors are great. I'm a huge fan. There's no better time than now to buy a suppressor. And say you do have that suppressor, maybe the recoil impulse is a little bit sharper than you imagined, or maybe it's not the push that you wanted. Maybe you're coming off target more than you want. Maybe you want the benefits of a muzzle brake. Well, enter Recoilx. If you have a suppressor with a threaded front end cap, Recoilx has a new suppressor compensator that will thread in to the front of that suppressor. They have something like 9 different thread patterns that are available right now, with more coming to market very soon. So on the front of that brake, or on the front of that suppressor, you're going to thread in the Recoilx compensator, and you're going to get the benefits of a muzzle brake on top of the benefits of your suppressor. So it's a really cool product and really innovative. Coming to the market at $185, it's very affordable. And the little bit that I've played around with the Recoilx brake, it really does work. It's going to allow you to stay on target better, so you're going to have less muzzle flip. It's also going to give you a little bit of a different feel in the shoulder with less movement in the rifle. So as you can see in the footage that I'm rolling here, just installing that recoil compensator on the front of your suppressor is going to make a pretty noticeable change to performance. So if you're interested in the Recoilx suppressor compensator, check out their website. I'll link it down in the description below, as well as in my link tree through the campsite bio, so you can navigate over to their website. Again, they currently have something like 9 thread patterns. They're made in the USA. Their founder is one of my buddies, and I'm excited to be able to talk about their product and help them bring it to market. So again, if you want the benefits of a muzzle brake on top of the benefits of a suppressor, and you have a threaded end cap, check out Recoilx and their suppressor compensator. With that, let's move down to the 100-yard line and start shooting. First up, let's take a look at our 100-yard performance with each rifle. Now, there's a lot going on here, so let's chat about the results that we have here on paper. Now, first thing I did was fire the M110 unsuppressed with 5 rounds. And that landed right here on this center left dot. Now, understand 5-round groups are statistically insignificant, but they are directional, and they'll give us a comparison point. So for the unsuppressed group here with the M110, we got these 5 rounds that landed in a group that's 1.1 inch. So pretty decent accuracy. I'm happy with that. Across the chronograph, we got an average speed of 25.78, extreme spread of 22, SD of 7.6, and a G7 calculated BC of 0.275. Then, because the M110 was all set up, I went ahead and installed the suppressor, and then came down here aiming at this dot, fired my first round to get an idea of point of impact shift. So pretty significant shift. That was something like a 0.5 mil elevation change and something like 0.8 on the windage. Dialed that in, fired 3 rounds right here, very tight, fired 5 more just to confirm the data. And also, if you're familiar with those M110 suppressors, you need to fire a couple of rounds to get them kind of carbon locked or get them seated on the rifle. So that's what I did here. And then we moved up and fired the 10 rounds here in the upper left dot. Now, as you can see, this 10-round group overall is going to measure 1.25 inches. So in my opinion, really solid accuracy for that M110 platform. So 1.25 inch, that's going to be plenty capable for a man-sized target out to distance, which you'll see in this video. Velocity, 2571, so really no change there versus unsuppressed. Extreme spread of 59, which is pretty huge. SD of 20.2 and a calculated G7BC of 0.280. So overall, whether it's unsuppressed or suppressed, it seems like that M110 with the Bartlein barrel is about a 1 to a 1.25 inch shooter, so solid accuracy, and I'm happy with that. Then I swapped over and we fired the Palmetto State Armory M110 clone. Unsuppressed, I was aiming here at this dot, and you can see I fired these 5 rounds into a group that measures 1.8 inch. Now you'll notice in the footage, my first round landed up here high and left. Not exactly sure what that was. It felt like a good shot, but overall 1.8 inch, a little bit of a horizontal spread. The interesting thing on this group is the low velocity, 2543, much slower than any of the other groups. Extreme spread, again, huge at 60. SD of 21.8, calculated G7 BC of 0.281. So 1.8 inches, I installed the suppressor. I came down here, aiming at this orange dot in the lower right corner. I fired my first round, which landed here. So a little bit of point of impact shift there, but really not much. Dialed on the correction, it was a couple of tenths in each direction, and fired these rounds up here. Now these rounds, there's 6 of them here. As you can see, the 1 flew out, but these 5 were pretty solid right here. Dialed on a small correction, and then came up here and fired 10 rounds on the upper right-hand dot with the suppressed M110 clone from PSA. Now what you're gonna see right here, 9 rounds stacked into what I call a very acceptable group for that rifle. And then 1 flew way over here. I'm really not sure what this flyer was because all the rounds to me felt good. Definitely none of them felt that poor. So if we look at the total group, it's like 3.5 inches total. If we take the 9 that are in a decent group right here, that's 1.8 inch. So very minimal change in accuracy by installing the suppressor. For velocity, we got an average of 2583, so in line with what I would expect. Extreme spread of 41, SD of 12.8, and a calculated G7 BC of 0.279. So the things I notice, definitely the Knights M110 with that Bartlein barrel is showing better accuracy. The PSA, they're at about 1.75 to 1.8 inch. I'm going to kind of disregard this. I have no clue what that round was. So call it a 1.75 inch shooter, 1.8 inch shooter right here at 100 yards. Acceptable accuracy for what that rifle is, and that'll get us hits out at distance, which we'll take a look at here in just a second. Between the 2 rifles, I'm seeing minimal difference, whether it be in accuracy or velocity from the suppressor install. Again, not sure why this one's so slow, but it seems like this load in general is running about 2575. So what I'm going to do now is plug the ballistic data into the AB Boss app and pair it with the Fire 4000 laser rangefinder so that I can laser target out at distance and then get my ballistic data for each rifle to shoot. So with that, let's stretch out and start engaging some steel. Let's use the Knights M110 to put our first rounds on steel. So downrange, I've got a full-size Zipsic set up, as well as a 2/3 Zipsic there on the left. We'll start here, one of my favorite shooting positions off the rocks. So let's go ahead and get at range. 668 yards is calling for 5.2 mils. Now, I went ahead and updated the AB Boss app with my current weather conditions, pressure, humidity, temperature, as well as the ballistic data for the load that we're shooting. Average speed of 2575. And I used a G7 BC of 0.270. That's a little bit lower than we calculated off the True Ballistic chronograph, but a little bit higher than what Berger says there on the box. So 0.270 is what we plugged in. I have that all paired up. Now let's just, we'll hold that over. I did put in a 10-mile-an-hour wind from 1 o'clock, so it's calling for 0.4 mils right, 5.2 up. So we'll just start right here. And let's just go maybe right edge of plate. Impact. 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 That upper right shoulder. Impact. So as you can see, no problem connecting there at 5.2 mils. Here we go with the PSA, 660 yards. We'll hold that same 5.2 and 0.4 right. The left edge. Left edge. Impact. So just as easy with the PSA. Let's keep pushing further. Since the trigger cam was already on the PSA, we'll start with this back here at 830 yards. I already ranged the target there with the Fire 4000, so I know it's 830 yards. It's calling for 7.4 mils of elevation. And wind is calling right 0.6. So we'll go ahead and start with that. I actually think I'll dial it on so that you guys can hopefully clearly see it in the trigger camera. There's 7.4 dialed on. We'll go right 0.6. Let's just shoot the 2/3 dipstick. Impact, first round. Impact. The left edge. Man, I tell you what, these A2 stocks are hard for recoil control. You can see the rifle's jumping a lot. Pat. 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 So there you have it. 830 yards, 2/3 dipstick, no problem with the PSA. Now we'll try the M110. We'll engage that same 2/3 dipstick out there at 830 yards. Then I'll go ahead and dial up the 7.4 mils that we need. And we'll start right. Well, first off, we should, oh wow. We'll start right 0.8, which is kind of where we're making our impacts with the Palmetto. Just off the upper right corner. Pat. Pat. Low left. Pat. Pat. Low left. Right. Oh, wind must have died, huh? Impact. So, might have had a few more misses in there than the PSA actually, but it seemed like the wind might have changed up a bit. But really no problems connecting on a 2/3 dipstick, 830 yards. Right now I should be in the ballpark of 1,000 yards. So we'll go ahead and arrange that. Full size plate. Oh, 1075. Calling for 11.6 up, so I'll dial that on. I was hoping to be in the ballpark of about 1,000. We're a little bit beyond that, and it's calling for right 0.8. Oh, wow. So we'll go ahead and just hold that in the reticle. What do you think? First round impact? Actually, I'm gonna go 1 to center. Let's get our parallax fixed here. Something like that. 1 to center. Just off that low left corner. Off the right edge. Pat. Pat. Left edge. Pat. 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 Let's try the 2/3. Just off the right edge. Impact. So there you have it. 11.7 mils of elevation to 1075. Now let's try the PSA. Here we go with the PSA M110 full-size IPSC at 1075. Calling for 11.7, which I've dialed on. Oh, wow. Remember with the M110, we're making those impacts in the ballpark of like 1.2. So that's where I'll start. Impact. Off the left edge. Upper right shoulder. Okay. Those felt like good shots. Pat. Upper right shoulder. Let's try the 2/3 IPSC. Okay. Like a 1.4. There's a little bit of an elevation spread there that I feel like is not me. 1.2. So we weren't able to connect on the 2/3 IPSC. Ultimately, we made our impacts on the full-size IPSC. Pretty regular and consistent. I did feel like the group was a little bit larger, definitely than the Knights M110. Let's see if we can push out further. Alrighty, last firing position. Again, we're going to start with the PSA, just because that's where the trigger cam already was. I ranged it with the Knights, 1,250 yards exactly, which calls for 15.7 mils that I will go ahead and dial on. And it's calling for something like 1.2 mils right for windage. Based on our experience there at 1075, I think I'll start at like a 1.5. I didn't really update the wind in the app, so we'll just kind of ballpark it, wing it here at 1.5 right. So with that, I also ran down and repainted my target. There we go. So let's just give it a go. Okay, not quite aggressive enough on the wind call. Elevation looked good. Let's go over there to like a 2 mil. Got to do a better job of recoil control on this thing. Impact, 2 mils. Off that left edge. Upper right shoulder. No call on that one. I can get a better position behind this. This thing's got some recoil, and with this A2 stock, it slides on the bag. Man. So that was up there at like a 1.5. Let's come down 2/10. Go 1.5. Man. Come back up a 1/10 and we'll go 1.5. Pat. Get down on the bag. And that dropped low. So we had 2 impacts out there, roughly 1.5 mils of elevation, 15.6. So let's try the Knights. Here we go with the Knights M110, 1,250 yards. Let's go ahead and dial on that same 15.6 mils of elevation. Something like that. The PSA seemed to be in the ballpark at about 1.5 mils right, so let's go ahead and start there. Although it does feel very calm. I'm just looking at the Mirage. Let's just try, let's go 1.2. I feel like it's a little bit less. 1.2 right. Just under it. Let's do the same hold, see where we land. Impact. Back. High and left over that shoulder. Get a better position. The right edge. Over the head. Off the left edge. Pack. Pack. Impact. So, I believe that was 5 impacts out there at 1250. Couple of rounds seemed a little bit sporadic going up over the head, but ultimately we connected on a full-size IPSC really without much trouble. That was a ton of fun. There you have it, a side-by-side look at the Knights Armament M110 and the Palmetto State Armory Sabre 10 M110 clone out to 1,250 yards. Now you got to let me know in the comments down below, what did you think about the performance of each rifle? How did you feel like that Palmetto State Armory stacked up to the Knights M110? Did it meet your expectations or exceed them? Or did you feel like the Knights M110 outperformed it in every way? I'd love to chat with you down below and hear your thoughts. Now while you're doing that, let's talk about my experience running these two rifles side by side. First thing we did was move down to the 100-yard line where we fired unsuppressed groups as well as suppressed groups. And right away, we did see a difference in the two rifles. So let's talk about the Knights M110 first. Unsuppressed group, we saw that right in the ballpark of 1.1 inches for 5 rounds. So very nice accuracy. I'm really happy with that 175 OTM from Berger. Install the suppressor. My suppressor shift was actually pretty large, bigger than I expected. It was something like the impact landed 0.5 mils low and something like 0.8 mils right. Corrected that and then came up and fired 10 rounds into 1.25 inches. Really happy with that. 1.25 inch, 10 round group with an M110 suppressor, I feel like is really solid performance. It's going to set you up for great work down range, and I feel like we saw that in the video. Velocity on that rifle is running something like 25-75 feet per second. I then swapped over and fired the Palmetto State Armory M110, the same course of fire. 5 rounds, unsuppressed, landed in a group that was something like 1.8 inches wide. It was kind of a horizontal spread. And then I moved down, installed my suppressor, a little bit of a point of impact shift, not nearly what the M110 can was, and fired 10 rounds on the upper right-hand dot. Now remember, the 10-round group, all 10 of them were something like 3.5 inches. I had that one flyer that landed way off to the right. I'm really not sure why, because it felt like a good shot. If we take that one out, assume it was a fluke, maybe it was me, unclear, and we focus on the 9 that landed into a pretty decent group, those 9 were 1.8 inches. So ultimately, we saw the M110 with the Bartlein barrel, a more accurate solution. The PSA Sabre 10, I feel like, was acceptable accuracy for what the rifle is at the price point. And as we saw, both of them were very capable downrange. The cool thing that I saw in both rifles is adding the suppressor really didn't change the performance of either rifle all that much. Groups remained roughly the same, velocities were roughly the same. Aside from the PSA, when I went from unsuppressed to suppressed, we had a pretty major change in the average. Not sure what that was about, but really not a major difference when I added the suppressor. Then we moved out and started to shoot steel. First up, we fired right here at 660 yards. We shot at the 2/3 IPSC and really had no problem with either rifle. Both of them had no problems connecting out there at 660 yards on that plate. I don't remember hit percentages. I know it was very high. We even had something like a first round impact with the PSA from here. We then moved over and fired at 830 yards, still on the 2/3 IPSC, and again, hit percents were relatively high, really no problem connecting with either rifle. I think at 830 yards, the PSA might have actually had a higher hit percent than the Knight's M110 did. Then we moved out and fired at 1,075 yards, and this is where I felt like we started to see the gap between the rifles grow. So I felt like here at 665 and at 830, the rifles were pretty evenly matched, and the misses were likely me or the wind. When I moved out to 1,075, I felt like the Knight's M110 performed noticeably better than the Palmetto State Armory did, and that might be because the bigger accuracy or the bigger groups that the Palmetto was laying down. Could have been the wind, it could have been me, but I do feel like the Knights performed better at the 1,075 yard line. And I can illustrate that when I moved over to the 2/3 Zipstick. Remember with the Knights, I had a first round miss. I made that correction and landed on the second round. So the consistency was there. The accuracy of the rifle was consistent, allowing me to see the miss, correct, and hit that fairly small target. The PSA, while I connected on the large full-size Zipstick, which is a win, when I moved over to the 2/3 Zipstick, I fired 3 rounds and never connected on that 2/3 Zipstick. So I was able to see my misses, make my correction, but the consistency wasn't there in order for me to make that correction and hit that plate. So then we pushed out to 1,250 yards, and again, I felt like we saw the Knight's M110 have an advantage over the PSA. We connected, I believe it was 5 times with the Knight's M110 on the full-size Zipstick out there at 1,250 yards. We did have a couple of kind of random flyers that landed out there. Not sure if that was me, the wind, or at that point, that bullet had actually transitioned into that subsonic zone, so maybe it was doing some weird things. The Knights connected 5 times, so 50% hit ratio. The PSA landed 2 impacts out there. Again, not a ton of consistency. So when we speak to the accuracy of the rifle, yes, the Knight's M110 was a more accurate rifle. We saw that at the 100-yard line, and really we saw that the whole way out. But I felt like the PSA Sabre 10, when you think about the practical size targets that I was shooting, was very usable. I would say out to 800 yards for sure. And even at 1,000 yards, we had a decent number of hits out there. So it was very usable at 1,000 yards from an accuracy standpoint. Next up, let's talk about the other things that I noticed while shooting the rifles. The first will be these A2 stocks. So these A2 stocks with this gradual kind of angle here are just not that handy for shooting long range. They don't ride a bag well. I had trouble with both rifles with recoil management because they would slide down on the bag, really changing where my crosshairs landed. So I really had to manage the recoil as good as I could to be able to spot my impacts. And a couple of times you probably saw me do not a great job. Now, where is there an opportunity for improvement on this rifle? It would be in this stock. I don't know the dimensions, maybe I'll take a measurement and include some pictures, but the stock on this rifle is very short, much shorter than the same style stock on the Knight's rifle. Yes, they both have the angled bottom, which doesn't ride a bag well, but this one being so short had me very cramped on the rifle and made it hard for me to get my optic mounted with solid eye relief. As I keep this rifle longer and shoot more with it, I probably will change this out to something more precision oriented. I love the Magpul PRS. For precision work, get a little bit more length and get a flat bottom to ride a bag. But this is maybe one of the #1 things that I noticed on this rifle that I would change out to make it perform better for me. Now with that, where did Palmetto win with this rifle? I tell you what, shooting these two things side by side, I noticed there's some pretty major advantages in a couple of places for the Palmetto. The first will be the price. This package for $1,500 is pretty unbelievable. So price is a win for Palmetto. The other thing I noticed, kind of a shocker, is the trigger. The Palmetto State Armory 2-stage trigger is way nicer than the Knight's armament. It's lighter, it's crisper, it's easier to shoot accurately. So this is a stock PSA trigger. This is a stock Knight's armament 2-stage trigger. And I tell you what, side by side, the difference is noticeable. The PSA has a much nicer trigger. Also, the PSA ran flawlessly throughout the day. No functioning issues, worked well with a Magpul PMag. Now, other things I noticed about the PSA is going to be the recoil. I felt like the recoil was sharper and heavier with the PSA than the Knight's M110, and I believe that comes back to the weight. Yes, I'd adjusted the gas block down to try to fine tune and make it as soft as possible, but when you look at this rifle, it is noticeably lighter. You look at this setup versus this one, as they are right now, I don't have a scale, this is noticeably lighter than the Knight's M110. Lighter weight is a win in most cases, unless you're doing target shooting, which I like to do. That's where weight is an advantage. So this rifle, being light, might be a win for some of you. But if you're into long-range target shooting, you want a rifle that's easy to control, stay on target, you want that weight. And the lightweight of this rifle made this thing noticeably more kick or noticeably more jump with each shot. Pair that with the A2 stock that was already very cramped for me and this rounded butt plate. I had some trouble keeping this rifle on target after my shots to be able to spot those impacts. It wasn't bad, and it's an easy fix. Change the stock out. I think that'll help. Maybe add some weights to the thing, make it a little bit heavier here on the fore. When you pick these two rifles up, you'll notice the M110, all of the weight is in the front of the rifle, the heavy barrel, the heavy can. This rifle actually seems decently balanced, but the lighter weight, while a win, made it recoil heavier. Now with that, where else did the Palmetto State Armory win? I tell you what, from an accuracy standpoint, I believe the accuracy that this rifle delivered at the price point is very acceptable and very usable. You saw me make impacts consistently out to 800 yards with it. 1,000 yards, we were pretty good, and even connected on the plate at 1,200 yards a couple of times. So it wasn't that consistent, but the bullet did get out there. And I could tell all my buddies, hey, I hit at 1,250 yards with my PSA Sabre 10. So that is kind of cool. That is a win right there. So final thoughts. How do these rifles stack up? Again, the PSA comes in at such a lower price point, it's almost hard to even compare them. But when you look at this rifle, in my opinion, it looks great. It really does kind of give you that M110 vibe. So if you want that M110, you don't want to spend $15,000 or $20,000 or can't get the components, this rifle is going to hang on the wall and give you that look. So that is a major win. It is a nice shooter for the money. I do like that. It comes with some really cool components, this Radian Raptor charging handle, the safety here, the bolt release, the mag release being ambidextrous. There are some pretty cool updates or wins on this rifle. The package it comes with, the carry case, the 3 magazines. Thumbs up to Palmetto State Armory for putting this together and what they're doing to bring these style rifles to the market. I tell you what, they've got a lot of really cool stuff coming. I got to see their booth at SHOT Show. They've got an M110 K1 style rifle coming, which is a 16-inch clone of the SR25 ECC. So what Palmetto State's doing is awesome. They're bringing affordable rifles that scratch the itch that we all have for those GWAT clones. So at the end of the day, is this as accurate as the M110 with the Bartlein barrel? No. But is it very usable for the money? Yes, and I'm a fan of that. So if you've made it this far, thanks for watching. I hope you'll help me grow this channel. That's super easy. Like the video, share it with your buddies, comment down below. Most impactful is subscribe. If you like this content, click the subscribe button so that you're in line for my next video drop. With that, I hope to see you in my next video.